You yesterday, the one thing John asked you was, could you come up here with a clean slate, ignoring everything that you've seen before, ignoring everything that you've heard before, and listen to the facts of this case and render a decision based on what you hear here in Batesville? We remember that? We want you to come up here having no agenda, having no bias, being fair to Quentin Tellis, and being fair to Jessica Chambers. My job here in opening statements is kind of to lay out what I expect you to hear in this case. What I'm going to tell you about is a horrendous event that happened on December the 6th of 2014. I want to tell you about the involvement of this case and the involvement of the investigation. This case began on December 6, 2014, when first responders responded to a car fire on Heron Road located here in Panola County. They responded as a routine car fire. When the first responders arrived at the fire, they got out, they saw the car on fire, they went to work. Not as soon as the first one got out, you're going to hear Seth Cook, when he got out, he sees something coming in the distance. I'm going to let them describe to you what they saw. It immediately startled the first two there. They back out, pull down the road just to assess, see what's going on. You're going to go to Heron Road. You're going to visit this area. You're going to see that this is not the city of Batesville. This is not the city of Starkville. There's no street lights. This is out in the middle of the country. It's dark. It's loud. You're going to hear these first responders testify that when they realized that they were dealing with a human being, they approached her. Two of the officers went to fight the fire. The other officer, Cole Haley, will tell you that he actually approached Jessica. I'm going to let Cole describe to you Jessica's condition. I'm going to let Cole describe to you the scene that night. Cole's also going to describe to you that certainly they sent out for help. Shortly thereafter, Daniel Cole arrives. Daniel Cole is the director of the emergency operations here in Panola County. He is the chief fire officer for the county. Daniel Cole actually lived in the area. He was able to respond very quickly. Daniel Cole is also going to testify and describe to you the condition of Jessica. He's going to describe to you the noise on the scene, the temperament there on the scene from all the fire officers. He is going to talk to you about what she looked like. Some of this is going to be very graphic. You're going to see some photographs of what she looked like there on the scene and the condition that she was in. You're going to hear from numerous other firefighters. One thing you're going to hear early on is that they tried to talk to her. They tried to gather information from her. They're going to tell you that they thought they heard a name, and Daniel Cole's going to tell you how he thought he heard it. The name that you're going to hear early on is going to be Eric. I'll go ahead and tell you that. In the aftermath of this investigation, when investigators began this investigation, there were hundreds of investigators offering their services from everywhere. Federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies. Everybody wanted to help. This investigation began with the name Eric, and officers then began to look into every single Eric or Derek that lived in this area. They began to look at every single Eric or Derek that showed up on Jessica's phone records. They began to look at other Erics or Dereks that weren't even connected to Jessica, just showed up as friends of friends. There were no Erics or Dereks that were ever found to be viable suspects for this crime. I'm not going to go into detail on those investigations. We have investigators trained to do that can go into detail about some of those investigations and how far at length they went to find an Eric or Derek. Also, when this happens, the media shows up. They showed up in droves. This is a community that's not used to it. When the media starts showing up, we had people calling in tips. We had people calling in with suggestions. People around here were helpful. They all want to solve who burned this child. Jessica Chambers was a 19-year-old girl. We received every one of those tips and every one of those leads and developed them. We looked into every one of those tips and every one of those leads. There were several occasions, which investigators will tell you, that, the tips or leads that came in sounded pretty good when they came in. And these investigators got after it. We pulled phone records, we pulled data, we did interviews, we talked to family members. In each of those, you're going to hear about an intelligence analyst during the course of this trial. Every bit of that information that was brought in by the Sheriff's Department was sent to this intelligence analyst, and he compiled records upon records on each of these different suspects. We looked at each one of them to see if they were viable suspects for the murder of Jessica Chambers, and ultimately, every one of them were excluded as suspects for Jessica Chambers. You're also going to hear early on that in looking at her phone, one of the last known contacts we knew that she had, that she was with, was Quentin Tellis. I told you this happened on December the 6th of 2014. On December the 10th of 2014, investigators knew that Quentin had had contact with her. They conducted what they considered to be a contact interview. A contact interview is where you just go out, gather information. Quentin Tellis gave them a statement, told them that he had been with Jessica that day. He also gave them an alibi on that particular day, who he had been with while she was killed. He gave some other information. 4 days after the incident that was also with Eric and Derek out there, he gave them a Derek to look into. And they did it. At this time, after the contact interview with Quentin Tellis, the FBI came in. They conducted a second interview with Quentin Tellis. They went out to his house and talked to him. I want you to listen to that interview from Agent Dustin Blunt from the FBI, that Quentin told them where he lived, which is all going to be key in this case. You're going to see it all. We're going to take you there. John mentioned the field trips to you. Going to mention where he lived, a shed on his property, and what he kept inside that shed. Quentin Tellis offered that information to the FBI agent. Throughout the course of 10 months, we gathered information on numerous suspects, numerous Erics or Derricks. Paul Rowlett with the United States Attorney's Office will tell you how many of those Erics or Derricks we looked at, how many of those other suspects that we looked at. He actually gathered, he was the compiler of the information as the information came in, as the interviews were done, as data was collected, as DNA was collected. You'll hear about all of this stuff went to Paul. About October 2015, we had a meeting with the investigators in this case, and frankly, to be honest with you, the well had kind of run dry. Every one of those good leads we had run down had just kind of run dry. So we decided at that point, and Paul will testify to you, and some others will testify to you, to step back a little bit. Let's step back, see if we missed anything. Let's kind of revert back to the beginning, and we separated. We were all stationed in a command post, which I say a command post, a conference room at the Sheriff's Department. When we decided to step away and take a look at things, Paul went back to his office. As he looked back at his office, he began to look at the early suspects. One of those early suspects was, in fact, Quentin Tellis. You're going to hear Paul, and I'm not going to get into technical data with you, you're going to hear Paul and other agents tell you that it's pretty easy to pull somebody's phone records. It's a lot more difficult to pull that tracking location data off your telephone that these companies have. You have to get a court order from a judge. During that time frame, we did not have that tracking location data on Quentin Tellis' phone early on. It took a little time to come in. It takes the phone companies longer to provide that information. During that 10-month time frame, Paul's going to testify to you that that data actually came in. He loaded that data, and when he began to analyze that data, he noticed something that was odd. Quentin Tellis had not been truthful with investigators. Quentin Tellis told us the last time he saw Jessica was at noon, when we got her on camera dropping him off. These are things we could see. Quentin Tellis' phone that evening was hitting on what was in the same area as Jessica's phone. And the ironic part about it is it was in Batesville. You're going to hear this area where they live is in Cortland. It's 6 or 7 miles away. When Paul went back to look at the data the one thing we knew that we had knowns, and you're going to hear a lot about the word knowns. Knowns are facts. Those are things that do not change. Those are things that we can tell you, this is fact. We knew the knowns on Jessica's timeline, where she was throughout the day. When we got that location data back, that's when we knew that Quentin Tellis was in the same area as Jessica. At that point, Quentin Tellis needed to be talked to again. In November of 2015, investigators found Quentin Tellis in Monroe, Louisiana. They traveled to Monroe, Louisiana to interview Quentin Tellis. During that interview, Quentin was confronted to the fact that, hey, we got your location data now. Your phones are together here in Batesville. And then Quentin remembered, oh, yeah, I did see her. I went to Taco Bell and met her. Taco Bell right here in the middle of town. You passed it on 6 yesterday. But he tells them that he was in Big Mike's truck. Big Mike Sanford. You're going to hear Big Mike Sanford's name. He says he was in Big Mike's truck. He met her there. He got out, went through the drive-thru, and then got back in Big Mike's truck, and they both went back in their own vehicles to Cortland. So he separated himself with her. This is around 6:30. Jessica Chambers moved to the crime scene at 7:30. When officers returned back up here, they were skeptical of the information they received. They followed up on the information they received, and they went and talked to who else? Big Mike. Well, one thing you're going to hear that's really interesting about Big Mike is Big Mike is friends with a gentleman named John Jerry. Some of you might have heard of him, some of you might have not. He was an offensive lineman here at Salpanola High School. He was an offensive lineman at Ole Miss, and he went on to play offensive lineman for the New York City Giants. On December the 7th, the day after Jessica was murdered, the New York City Giants were playing the Tennessee Titans in Nashville at noon. Big Mike went to Nashville to see John Jerry play football. Big Mike took other people with him on that trip. Quentin Tellis told investigators that he was in Big Mike's truck and with Big Mike on the night that Jessica was murdered, and Big Mike's truck and Big Mike were nowhere in Panola County. He was 5 hours away. That led to a final January interview of Quentin Tellis. Investigators went back down to talk to Quentin regarding what they had been told, regarding the misleads, regarding the lies that he had told. When investigators finally got down there on that last interview, Quentin Tellis, when confronted again with the known data that investigators had, he told them, yeah, that's right, Big Mike was in Nashville. And then he admitted to them that he got in the car with Jessica Chambers in Cortland. He rode to Batesville with Jessica Chambers, and they returned back to his home, or you're going to find out about the area of his home. There's a separate spot near his home that you're going to find out about, and that's where they returned to from Taco Bell. Those are Quentin's own words. He's going to tell you he was with her until approximately 7 o'clock. As I told you, she moved to that crime scene at approximately 7:30. The next 30 minutes, I could sit here and tell you detail for detail what the state intends to show you. But the one thing that we told you yesterday, and the one thing that I'll stand behind, is that what I'm telling you today is not evidence. It's just to give you a foreshadow of what you're going to see. What Ms. Palmer and Mr. Peterson is going to stand up here and tell you is not evidence. Every bit of the evidence is going to come from that jury box. That's going to come in the form of numerous types of data. It's going to come in the form of numerous types of interviews. I don't want to tell you today what you're going to hear in that next 30 minutes. I want you to be observant and listen, because I know based on the evidence that's going to be put before you that when you hear all the evidence the state has, and you stand here with no agenda and a clean slate and start today, once you've heard all the evidence the state offers, you're going to have plenty of information to find him guilty of capital murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Does the defense wish to make the opening statement now?
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
All right. Court recognizes Ms. Palmer for opening statement by the defense.
Good morning. December 6, 2014. It was a Saturday, and I can't believe that it's really been almost 4 years now. This year, December, it'll be 4 years. A young woman was indeed killed, and Lord knows my heart has been burdened by this myself. Yet minutes after Miss Jessica was seen by the first firefighters and the emergency personnel that was on the scene, what Miss Jessica did was she walked and she talked. And I'll say that again. One of the firefighters saw her coming towards him, towards two of them. She walked and she talked that evening. Now, that would be something that you would not expect that a person in her condition would do. But that's what she did that evening. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the state has just told you a long story about what they feel happened on that Saturday 4 years ago. Yet, to this day, we still do not know what really happened to her. They can't prove it. There's no evidence to support it. It's all speculation. But what we do know is that minutes after Miss Jessica walked towards trained people who could help her, she talked to trained people who were standing and kneeling as close to her, even closer than what I am to you now. And she told these first responders one name, and that name was Eric. Now, unlike what the district attorney's office has just told you, the evidence will show that law enforcement did not check every viable lead on finding who Eric was. And as he stated to you, once it dried up for them, instead of continuing to look for the person who Jessica said did this to her, once it dried up, they thought, well, let's look at records now. Let's download her phone, and let's compare cell phone records, which you will find are not reliable as to say, you're right here and I'm right here. Cell phone records are not reliable to tell you where two people are at the same time. And further, the DA's office started to speak with witnesses when Quentin said where he was that day. Witnesses that you'll find are unreliable as well. I'm not standing here saying to you what I feel happened. I'm telling you what individual reports said. And you will see each of these reports as the first responders take the stand before you today and tomorrow. That's what's evidence. That's why I'm here this morning saying this is what the evidence will show. It's evidence that can't be ignored. And guess what? The